First thing to know is that I consider the privacy officer role and the CISO role sort of flip sides of a coin. They complement each other. And really, you can't have one without the other if you're going to have good data protection, good privacy and security practices. The CPO role, or the privacy officer role, I really break out around sort of policies and practices related to the collection and the use and the sharing of personal information, as well as a large swath of what I'll just blanketly call surveillance and ethical considerations that are particularly important in higher education. The CISO role is really about protecting data, and sometimes it's protecting it according to law, protecting it according to the policies and practices that you'd have the privacy officer write for you. So you can't really do one without the other. I could have all the great policies and practices in the world laid out before everybody, but if I'm not actually securing the data in the background, if I'm not encrypting it, I'm not using two-factor, I'm not using those tools, the data could all go away. Flip side is, I could have all the greatest security tools and techniques and technologies implemented, but if my practice is to give away data the minute somebody asks me, to share it, whether it's with business partners, law enforcement, without sort of other best practices to prevent such things, then you really don't have privacy. So they go hand in hand. There's a lot that CISOs do that could be extremely privacy invasive. We have a lot of tools and a lot of data that could tell the private goings on. What does your email look like? What are you writing? Who are you writing it to? What websites you're surfing to? All those are in my power to review if need be. It's why you need a privacy officer to check that and strike the right balance in the relationship. So overall, complementary roles, partnership and collaboration is everything between them, and a healthy amount of tension isn't bad, but ultimately they have to work together. Some of the issues are just getting people to recognize that privacy is a value. It's a value that particularly in higher ed underpins and supports values like academic freedom, intellectual free expression, student growth and development. All those have privacy touches that are becoming more important as we move into an era of big data, data science, analytics. And oh, by the way, officially there's privacy-related laws we all have to pay attention to, whether that's FERPA around student data, HIPAA around health and medical data, the Common Rule, which talks about human subject research data. They all have strong privacy touches. None of them are just there for privacy. Maybe the Common Rule is closest. But there's a whole compliance piece that we have to think about in the privacy world. That said, when I think about privacy in the higher ed context, it does go back to what I call the higher level math. So it's not just about meeting the spirit and letter of the law. If that's the only reason I was doing privacy in higher ed, I wouldn't have come back. It's about things like academic freedom, freedom of expression, freedom of association, student growth and development. All of those have strong privacy components and ethical data use components that if we don't pay attention to them, it changes what we do as higher education professionals. I'm all for GDPR in theory, and I think something that many in the US in particular don't understand is sort of its genesis. So the way we've approached privacy in the US versus much of the rest of the world, not just the EU, but we'll stick with the EU, it's fundamentally different. We see privacy as a set of laws based on data that are things we don't want shared. Health information. Might be I want to protect my educational records from my parents. I don't want to share my loan information. So it's something called a sectoral approach. Privacy in the EU is fundamentally a human rights issue. So think back to World War II or even pre-World War II and the number of fascist dictatorships in actually pre, during, and post-World War II, whether that's the Soviet Union, Nazi Germany, East Germany and the Stasi, Salazar in Portugal, Franco in Spain. The way they stayed in power was to devalue individuality and to pry into people's affairs and be able to hold that against them to get them to conform. It's a human subject, or it's a human rights value. And that this is now being pushed as part of the conversation is really heartening to me. Aside from just it being difficult to actually comply with GDPR in the US and the EU, frankly, I worry that we treat it in the US more like HIPAA or FERPA, that it's going to be treated as a compliance thing as opposed to the real, again, that higher subject stuff. This is about human rights and about valuing individuality as opposed to conformity. We have privacy as a value and as a concept, not just in our laws, but in parts of our Constitution. While the word privacy doesn't exist, that we have concepts like no illegal search and seizure. Are we going to throw that out? No, we have the Fifth Amendment, and you have a right to not self-incriminate yourself. Are we going to throw that out? Those are privacy values. So yeah, in a world of pervasive data collection, big data, data science, and value in it. It's not just that it's being done against us; it's being done for us. I hate to throw out the concept that has gotten us fundamental in the way this democracy and many democracies have grown. Big data is actually breaking long-held privacy practices. So the U.S. in the wake of Watergate and in the wake of the McCarthy era actually had a privacy commission that helped instantiate fair information practice principles. Those principles informed how the EU has approached privacy. And big important values in those principles were transparency. You tell people what you're going to collect, why you're going to collect it. Use limitation. You only use the data for the purpose you collect it. Don't share it with people you don't need to share it with. In the big data world, that's turned on its head. We don't know what we want to use the data for. Of course we're going to use it for other purposes, and we want to share the data because there's such value in sharing of the data, whether that's to inform how government happens, how higher education happens, or even how we can take advantage of consumers in businesses. So the great part about being at Michigan is we have a number of faculty that are not just privacy aware, but this is their field of study. So probably the biggest thing I can think of is we had a data privacy day. So every year, January 28th is International Data Privacy Day. So clearly it's still a value out there. And a faculty member and I partnered to put together a half day's worth of program that brought in expertise from both the university as well as actually we had some international folks who videoed in. And it was a event that surpassed our expectations. We had hundreds of people attend. We had a lot of follow-up. We actually sparked some interdisciplinary conversations and research opportunities that if that hadn't existed, boy, things that might have been lost. So that actually grew out of another privacy-related faculty collaborative effort that I co-convened with some faculty members in our School of Information and our College of Engineering and other departments, where we, on a periodic basis, put together conversations at the confluence of technology, privacy, security, law, and policy. And so if you want to look it up, dissonance at UMich, somewhere along those lines, if you use those two words in whatever your browser or search engine of choice, it should come up. But we touch on a lot of the subjects, whether that's the Apple and FBI encryption debate to privacy in a big data world or in an Internet of Things world.